everyone. This is Diane Murray at Southern Art Gallery, and we are continuing our series on the different triads. Today we'll be looking at the Earth Triad, and there are many different pigments that you can use for this triad, but I have chosen Cobalt Blue from Ochre, Sienna Deep from Da Vinci, and Yellow Ochre from Ochre. The yellow ochre is PY43, that's the pigment, which is a standard yellow ochre pigment. This yellow ochre seems to be slightly less opaque than other yellow ochres that I've played with. The Cobalt Blue is a standard PB28. I particularly like Ochre's Cobalt Blue, and I also like Da Vinci's Cobalt Blue Deep. The burnt sienna that I use is a PR101, which is burnt sienna deep from Da Vinci. So I've made our little color chart, and basically I decided, since this block isn't used up here in my color charts, that is going to be the neutral, that is the mixture of all three of the primaries, well, the primary earth primaries. And if you mix all three, a yellow, a blue, and a red together, you should be able to get a neutral gray. So I've already done that for us. So now we're going to take the PY43, the yellow ochre, and I mixed it with itself, and I washed it out into a paler value, which is what I've done on the block here. I've done the Cobalt Blue the same. I've washed it out into a paler value. This would be your dark, this would be your mid-tone, and this would be your light value of this pigment. I've done the same thing for the burnt sienna. This would be the darker, this would be the mid-tone, although they're really close, and this is what it would look like if you washed it out and made it a light value. So let's take the yellow ochre and mix it with the Cobalt Blue and primarily yellow ochre, so just a very little amount of Cobalt Blue. And we get a dirty green, which I'm not surprised by. I don't use yellow ochre, honestly, on my palette. I used gold ochre instead by Winsor Newton. But it's good to have yellow ochre on your palette. I don't suggest it in my beginner's palette though, because I just find that it's not a pigment that I use very often. But if we take the Cobalt Blue and the yellow ochre with more of the Cobalt Blue, let's see what we get. We'll get a nice, very nice soft, slightly a blue slightly on the green side, and that's a very nice color right there. Okay, and if we take the yellow ochre and we mix it with just the smallest amount of burnt sienna, mostly with the yellow ochre, this is what we get. And if we take more of the burnt sienna and less of the yellow ochre, just a little bit of the yellow ochre, and you can't see my palette that I'm mixing from here because it's a porcelain palette, and it's on the side over here. We get much more of an orange. And I'm not making these mixes very intense because you can see the full strength up here of the pigments. And the last one, if we take the Cobalt Blue and we mix it with a small amount of burnt sienna, we should get a nice gray. And we do. And in stronger mixes, you can get a black with this mixture. It's very similar to the standard mix of burnt sienna and ultramarine. I like cobalt. It's just a softer, earthier blue, so it's one of my favorites. So if we take more of the burnt sienna and less of the cobalt blue, we're going to get more of a brown. And there it is. And of course you can make this much stronger depending on the pigment load that you put in there. And there you have it. So let's take our water and let's mingle these together. So first we'll take the cobalt blue. Cobalt blue granulates beautifully also. It's another reason I really like it. It's a bit softer and earthier than the ultramarine. And we take the yellow ochre, which is way too much. And we mingle those together. We should get a nice granulation with this. I think we probably need to add a little more cobalt blue. So I was heavy-handed with the yellow ochre there. And this is how I do this. I do the mingling just to see what these colors will do on their own when they're mixed together on the paper. You see they tend to neutralize themselves somewhat. And you get quite a soft earthy green. And even a blue-green in there, which is a nice combination. Okay. Now, let's wet this little rectangle. And this time, we'll drop in the cobalt blue. And the burnt sienna. And we should see some browns and some beautiful neutrals from this. Because it's an earth pigment, the burnt sienna has less of a dispersion than a lot of the man-made pigments like the quinacridomes. This is one of my favorite mixes though. I love this combination. You can get some of the most incredibly beautiful grays and browns from this combination right here. I really think that burnt sienna works better or is happier with cobalt blue than even with ultramarine. I think ultramarine and indanthrone are better with a stronger pigment like a PO48. You get the nicest mixes with that. As you can see, it's a gorgeous mixture. Absolutely beautiful. Okay, one more. This time we will do the yellow ochre. Which you can tell is just so opaque, so heavy, such a heavy pigment, which is why I tend to not use it. But the burnt sienna can hold its own against the yellow ochre, so I'm not too worried about that. You should get quite a nice orange with that, or range of oranges actually. And I suggest that you try this mingling of your paints. It gives you really a better representation of what the paints are capable of than if you mix them together on the palette. Okay, you can see we've got just an absolutely gorgeous range of oranges and yellow oranges going on there. Let's let that come down for a minute. You can see that this is much more of an earthy triad. You can see that how it would work better in landscapes, and I'm going to leave that because that's kind of neat. Okay, so there you have it. There's our earth triad of cobalt blue, burnt sienna, and yellow ochre. And I hope you found this helpful, and I hope you will subscribe to our channel. And if you like this video, that would really help the channel. And thank you again to my patrons for all your help in making these videos. And we will see you next week with another triad.